Hey all, here are OS Reviews. In this video, we're taking a quick look at the GMKtec G3. This is a Windows 11 Mini PC slash Nucbox. This particular company, I think, is a little bit more well known for some of their micro computers, mini PCs, which are even more compact, can almost fit in the palm of your hand. That being said, this particular model, the G3, is a more conventional size. That said, design still looks a little bit distinctive with this grid-like texture that kind of changes as you are pointing it at the light. It almost reminds me of kind of this retro look, plus the power key is also accented in a lighter shade of green. So at the very least, a little bit more colorful and playful than just the generic gray or black box that we've been seeing for so many years. The pricing on this thing is still competitive, I would say, usually selling for around $160. Comes in two configurations though. The base model has 8 GB of DDR4 RAM, compared to the higher config model comes with 16 gigs of RAM, which is the one as configured over here, combined with 1 TB of SSD, although the M2 SATA slot can also be swapped out using the top of the shell that we can pull off, and we'll take a closer look at that in a moment. As a entry-level mini PC though, it's still using a relatively low-end processor from Intel that we've been seeing for a while now. It's the 12th gen Alder N100, a spiritual successor to the Celeron chips of yesteryear. At least it is pretty energy efficient, drawing only 6 watts for the TDP, as well as the 7nm architecture. It can turbo up to 3.4 GHz and has plenty of cooling fans inside. It's not a fanless computer and does come with Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2, and it can connect to 2 external 4K monitors. You can even mount it with the VESA adapter onto a TV or monitor, and it kind of hides there from view. And then further down below, you'll find the assortment of quick user guides. The presentation seems to be a little bit better than many of the other ones we've seen at a similar price point. There's also going to be the power adapter. It's using a barrel plug as opposed to USB Type-C, but otherwise it's drawing 36 watts maximum. And you also get a bundled HDMI cable in addition to the aforementioned VESA mount adapter. So taking a closer look at the design of this mini PC box, again, I do like the color scheme. It just sets it apart from the crowd a little bit more. Top lid here, although it is crafted out of plastic, can be popped off without any screws, making it a little easier if you wanted to, again, attach a second SSD or swap out components like the RAM. So here is a 16 GB card that is pre-inserted and also connect to PCIe accessories as well. So again, it is pretty easy to get into the internals. Afterwards, we can just snap the lid onto the top once again, and the bottom here is actually where the fan is located, providing some of that active cooling. It's also where the VESA mount, as well as the soft touch rubber feet, prevent it from sliding around onto a table. On the front, we have just that simple power key and 2 full-sized USB Type-A 3.0 ports, and located on the back are all of the remaining I/O, including the 2 additional full-sized HDMI ports, as well as the barrel plug for power and 3.5mm headphone jack, Ethernet if you don't want to use Wi-Fi, and 2 more full-size USB Type-A 3.0 ports, so a total of 4 USB Type-A ports. There isn't a Type-C port, however, on this particular model. Still, I think it is a fair selection of I/O, all things considered, and I do like the fact that some of these are on the front for easier access. There is a Kensington lock as well for security and some additional ventilation. Here's a quick size comparison, by the way, with kind of an average 6.5-inch phone, so you get a better idea. It's not bad, still is very small as far as Windows desktops are concerned, even if it doesn't exactly fit in the palm of your hand like some of their other chassis. And it looks like they are using kind of that newer Intel sticker design as well, that's slightly holographic and kind of changes in the light. Actually makes it look pretty modern. Let's take a closer look at the performance and software next. Alright, so the setup process is pretty straightforward. It only takes around 2 or 3 minutes to get into the Windows UI from setup. Signing into a Microsoft account is optional and something that you do inside of the Windows UI instead of during the setup flow. And that means even connecting to Wi-Fi is something that you do when you get into the Windows environment here, so initial boot is really fast, and it's a fairly clean version of Windows. There are no other bloatware apps on here aside from just the Microsoft Essentials, so out of the box you have over 915 GB free for you to install other applications and media files that you can further augment, and a lot of the AI features which are being touted in Windows 11 these days you'll also find here, including some of the Copilot functions that are leveraging ChatGPT to ask different questions, generative art as well that you can just leverage directly at the bottom of the Windows taskbar. So anyways, taking a quick look at the performance, the Intel N100 scores a little bit north of 5,400 on Passmark. Here's also how it stacks up against some other processors on the market. So obviously it's not going to be as fast as more current gen Intel Core i5, i7s, or Apple M1, M2 processors. You can tell give you roughly 3 to 4 times the performance score. But if you're comparing it to a Core i3 or i5 that are a couple generations old, it actually is not too far apart, surprisingly. And the N100 is also comparable in performance to something like the N95 as well as the N97, some other popular choices in low-end computers. As a final reference, the Celeron M3 that was extremely popular in other $200 computers, mini PCs, and laptops from just a few years back only scores under 2,000 on Passmark. So for a computer in the similar class, this is already getting almost 2 times faster, and you definitely feel that as you're navigating around the UI. Elements are just a little bit more responsive, even though it's not blazing fast 24/7. Again, basic navigation as well as things like web browsing, in addition to document editing, can still be a decent enough experience. So as you can tell here, loading up pages like The Verge, which can be quite complex, plenty of videos and ads, still feels relatively fast, which is also helped by pretty good antenna reception quality. I was getting almost full bars for Wi-Fi, and again, this one does support Wi-Fi 6, so you don't have to be waiting too long for things to buffer and load back. Definitely is good enough for, again, doing research. Even opening up a few dozen tabs in the browser still felt relatively responsive as I was jumping back and forth between them. Here's a couple of Office documents just to serve as reference. Again, doesn't seem to be too problematic, even for an entry-level chip like the N100 to handle. Let's also jump into a quick video playback test. I'm going to pull up Stats for Nerds and see how it fares if we bump up the resolution first to full HD. We can see that, again, loading times are pretty responsive thanks to the fast Wi-Fi reception, and currently I'm not seeing too many drop frames. It definitely still seems quite smooth as the video here is playing back. But let's also now bump it up to 4K resolution. It may take just a split second here initially for it to render, and we'll see a couple of drop frames at the beginning, but once the video starts to play, it becomes still quite smooth. So you can expect to wait maybe a split second longer, but afterwards the playback experience still looks quite good if you're consuming things like YouTube or Netflix, streaming back in 4K. Otherwise, the fans inside of this particular unit aren't too loud, I would say. So if we put it close here to the microphone, that is as loud as this mini PC gets. But if you only have a couple of tabs in the browser or just 1 or 2 apps open, it usually becomes more quiet as it's idling. In fact, sometimes it's completely silent, but the presence of the fan does help it just prevent itself from overheating and helping the performance stay a little bit more stable as you're pressing it compared to completely fanless machines, which may have to throttle a bit. Otherwise, as a regular Windows 11 computer, of course, you can install any x86 executable, including legacy programs, drivers, which is still an area where desktop OS like Windows has an advantage compared to, say, Chrome OS that is newer, and there's some increasing amount of Android-type mobile applications that you can install. But if you're working with more obscure or legacy tools, the vast amount of desktop apps that, again, Windows is compatible with is still an advantage that you'll get here. You can install pretty much anything. Overall, SSD also seems to be responsive enough from a read and write speed perspective. So doing a bit of light multitasking, switching back and forth between Office versus work shouldn't be too problematic here. In similar fashion, some light video editing, as well as maybe some Photoshop, light image editing should also be okay on this mini PC. Again, keep in mind that it is using integrated graphics as opposed to a dedicated or discrete GPU, but if you're keeping things casual, you're just stringing along a couple of clips, maybe in full HD, or doing some light touch-ups, the computer here can still handle those. For example, rendering and exporting a 10-minute full HD clip took under 5 minutes for it to finish and save. So again, if you're keeping things light, it should be all right. However, if you're editing 4K or 8K clips, that's probably not going to be the best idea on something that's more entry level. You're going to probably have to wait significantly longer there. You can also expect an okay experience on titles like Grid, or if you're looking at retro emulation style titles from older consoles of yesteryear, including Nintendo 64. Some of those classics shouldn't pose too big of a problem, even for an entry level computer like this to handle. So again, keeping keeping things casual, as long as you don't expect to play AAA games locally, you should be fine. Or of course, you can consider streaming some of the games, so leveraging services like Xbox's xCloud for some remote play, or using services like Amazon's Luna. And since this machine does have, again, pretty good internet connectivity thanks to the Wi-Fi 6 chip, you can play back those more demanding games using more powerful server over the cloud, and this just acts as basically a terminal with your own keyboard and mouse. So that is more or less it as far as our quick hands-on review of the GMKtec Nucbox G3. And all things considered, I would say this is a pretty solid entry-level mini PC. It has an attractive enough design, the components are pretty easy to upgrade, and also performance is good enough for casual computing needs when it comes to browsing, some media consumption and streaming, in addition to maybe casual emulation, and of course office-related tasks. No, this is not going to be the most powerful computer in the world, but for the price point, offers a pretty good representation of what you can expect in an entry-level computer here in 2024. It no longer freezes or slows down, for example, compared to Atoms or even less powerful Celerons in the past, so it's bare bones, and as long as you calibrate your expectations accordingly, it actually is not shabby, I would say. You can check out more details if you are interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That has been the GMKtec Nucbox G3.